I'm sure we've all heard don't judge a book by its cover, or you shouldn't judge people, or you shouldn't pass judgment too lightly. What is more often than not different from what ought, should, could, and would be when it comes to reality and human nature. Now, should we judge or should we not? That's the same question as saying to be or not to be. Judgment and judging something at face value is essentially that's ingrained very deeply into our hindbrain. It is something that you observe in the nature all the time. Like animals, they have to pass judgment on different situations and different things happening around them. Because you always, if let's say you're an animal, and people are animals to a degree, if not only by genetics, but through plenty of behaviors. An animal has to discern from a different animal or a situation whether there's a threat, whether it's a friend, whether it's a foe, whether it's something you can eat, something you should avoid. So, for example, when animals in nature, generally speaking, when you've got animals that have got very bright colors, on an instinctual level, animals go like, "Ooh, that's probably poisonous. Probably don't want to eat it." So, when you go around town, for example, you see somebody with really bright and colorful hair, kind of the same thing, if you know what I mean. Um, so, if animals alone have to pass quick judgments for just the sake of survival, is that a predator? Can it kill me? Should I be afraid? Can I eat it? Is it poisonous? And that also applies to plants. Herbivore animals, obviously, they have to know what sort of plants you want to eat. Otherwise, you could get sick and die. And if animals do this, humans do that too. We always judge things happening around us. We have to do that in order to, number one, survive, and number two, thrive. Now, is it good or not? Eh, you know, I think that's the wrong question. When you say judge a book by its cover, I think that also begs the question of, so what does the cover look like? If the cover looks boring, unattractive, um, yeah, disgusting. Yeah, I think a lot of people would judge that book by its cover. Should they do that or not? That's a different question. Perhaps with less relevance in this case. And when you say judge a book by its cover, that generally means that when you meet a new person, you have a first impression. And that first impression could be anything between complete, utter disgust to, falling in love. Or it could be, a high level of respect. Who knows? But that's based on appearance. And when you say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover when it comes to human interactions, you essentially are saying that you should give somebody the benefit of doubt. So, just in case your instinctual reaction to that person is erroneous. So, actually saying don't judge a book by its cover and you meet another person, what you're trying to say that you should not trust your instinct or your sixth sense to be correct in assessing what that person is like. And I think this is even more important for women because women have this intrinsic sense that they have a sixth sense and they are somewhat relying on their gut or their instinct or their feminine ability to determine if another person, whether it's a man or a woman, is good, bad, useful, not useful, etc. And I've noticed multiple times that if a woman is trusting her sixth sense to a degree, and then time passes, and what happens is that her initial assessment is wrong or erroneous to a large degree. She's got a very hard time accepting, like, ooh, maybe my radar was a bit off. Maybe my microscope, so to speak, was not that well calibrated. And especially if you confront her, or you let her know that I knew that you were making that assessment and I wanted to prove you wrong. You might either get a lifelong friend and admirer out of that woman, or they might hate you for the rest of their lives because you expose them. Now, somebody might say, well, you shouldn't manipulate people. It's like, yeah, exactly. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Yet it happens all the time. So should, could, or would, whatever. And I think the trick is because men have intrinsically the upper hand when it comes to, let's say, physical strength. So if a man gets in trouble, he can't do, let's say, verbal judo, especially in this case with a woman. He can always say, hey, okay, bring it on. But for women, it's not the same. Women don't, they're not actors in the physical realm the way men are. So women have to either be smarter, they have to be able to manipulate, or they have to use some sort of covert form to exercise power. And if a man kind of gets the upper hand of a woman in the realm, which generally should be controlled by women, then that exposes basically their number one agency, which is kind of the social calibration, that ability to read people, the ability to read between the lines or manipulate, if you want to take a kind of negative approach. So if a man is more capable of manipulation than a woman, then that basically is telling the woman, like, you've just been disarmed. So physically you can't put a fight to the guy, and in terms of manipulation you can't do that either. And I think a lot of women don't like the idea that they would be disarmed in a sense. And I think the same way as, let's say, a woman who is, and here we're talking averages, if a woman is a bit more skilled in terms of social calibration, and if she wants to, she's got more skills in manipulation over the man. But then on top of that, let's say she does a martial art. So if push comes to shove, she could kick the ass of the guy. How would that make the guy feel? He probably thinks, he feels some type of way. He's probably going to be a little pissed off because he gets exposed, especially in the arena where he should be having the upper hand. So that's probably going to kind of kick him in the self-esteem department. Now, how do you react to that? If a woman is more capable of manipulation, and she can kick your ass as a dude, you can either be like, oh, I don't like her, she's a manipulative bitch or whatever. That's the kind of the absolute wrong response to that. If that would happen to a man, let's say it would happen to me, I'd be like, damn, I must be doing something wrong. Learning the social calibration, that ability to manipulate, it's a little bit more difficult than becoming stronger. So what I would do first off is hit the gym, start a martial art, and be like, I'm never going to allow a situation where there's a chick that could at the same time manipulate me and kick my ass. So the quicker way is to learn how to defend yourself and get strong. And then at the same time, you should improve your skills in social calibration, that if you would ever need to manipulate anyone, you'd be more skilled at it. And here I use the word manipulate a lot, and a lot of people would get the wrong impression of why I use it. I use it because it's a strong word, and it kind of brings the message across. Because using things like influencing somebody, maybe it's more neutral. But it's kind of like if you have a knife. Sure, you can cut an apple with it, but it's still a knife. You could kill somebody with it. So it's a weapon, essentially. Ask the apple what the apple feels like about that knife, because that knife is going to cut you in half, right? Or peel you. I don't think the apple likes a knife. I think the apple thinks a knife is a weapon every single, day of the week. So that's why I use manipulation. It is a tool. It's kind of like alcohol. Alcohol has not killed anyone on this planet. It's the person who drinks excess amounts of it. So I look at these things, tools like ability to manipulate or ability to kick somebody's ass. Those are tools. You can use them for good or for evil. But passing judgment on a word per se comes back right at the beginning. Don't judge a book by its cover. Somebody might give you a great message of whatever sort, but they use one wrong word at the wrong place. You're like, oh, I don't like that. I think that's wrong because they use the word manipulate. That it shouldn't be like that. So the issue with judgment is also, and is very social, because especially for women, also for men, but for women especially, social acceptance, being part of a group, having friends, having a social skills and being a part of something is very important. Because if a woman is alone, generally things are not going well. A man can survive alone better than a woman on a balance of probabilities. So judgment generally means that you have a problem in terms of fitting in to a group. So you could be kind of pushed out of a group if you behave a certain way, and thereafter you get judged. So it is much more likely, if you come across somebody saying, oh, you shouldn't judge, that it's a woman or a feminine man who says that. Because you always hear also that you should be a man of your word, but you never hear you should be a woman of your word. So that means that as a man, you give your word, you gotta stick by it through thick and thin. Because if you give your word and for whatever reason you don't keep to your word, you're not labeled as a man. You're labeled as a liar. You're unreliable, etc. But if you're a woman and you give your word, you could have a bunch of excuses of like, oh, I felt this way, I had my periods, I was busy, I was stressed out, and that's why you kind of broke your promise. Is that fair? No. Is life fair? Of course not. So somebody saying that you shouldn't judge, there's a tendency that it might be a woman who's saying that, because women don't want to be judged, because they don't want to be excluded from, let's say, social circles. And the less people judge, the more it gives freedom to women to behave, let's say, without restrictions. And especially when it comes to this one particular point, which is if a woman is either fat or she is promiscuous. Nowadays in 2023, you've got this whole movement on the mainstream saying, oh, body positivity. You shouldn't judge somebody by their weight or the way they look, because everybody's beautiful. Yeah, no, man. It's not true. Doesn't matter how long, how much you want to try to brainwash men into thinking that, oh, you should love her curves because she's obese. Not gonna happen. Or if she's promiscuous, like, oh, that guy is just insecure. He cannot handle her, a real, strong, independent woman. It's like, not really. Guys just don't want fat women that are hoes, right? That's it. It's the same thing if a guy is fat and broke. Yeah, chicks don't want the guy. But then you got, magazines like Sports Illustrated, and you've got obese women on the cover, and you go like, what the hell is this? There's nothing sporty or beautiful about that. When have you seen a fat dude on Sports Illustrated cover? Is that equality? Debatable. When it comes to judgment, the other part is that people who are the most eager to say, don't judge, is either those who are quite religious, because in religion, there's always an embedded part that says judgment. Whether it's judgment day, but there's always somebody watching, and somebody knows what's going on. They know what you do, what you say, what you think, and they can pass judgment. Because if there's a superhuman being, let's call it God, God knows what's going on, and he can pass judgment on you. So either it's people who recognize that this is a part of your life if you adhere to religion, and they say don't judge unless you want to be judged. And then there are people who don't like religion at all because they say, well, I decide over what is good or what is not. I don't want somebody else or somebody else's book or somebody else's belief decide if I've done something wrong. And I don't want to be held accountable for that. So that's kind of the two parts of who don't like judgment. And of course, let's say you're a really bad person or you're a criminal, you're a narcissist, you're crazy. You don't like somebody saying, oh, let's judge you, because you get the short end of the stick. And I think on the religious side of it, it's a very good idea not to judge others, because if you judge, you will be judged as well, right? But here's the one key component of judgment. People who say they don't judge, they do. But the difference is, do you voice it out loud or do you keep it to yourself? Like I said, we all judge books by their covers all the time. That's human nature. That's what happens in nature and animals all the time. There's no shame in it. But obviously, if we're intellectual enough, we say, okay, now I've passed on a judgment at, let's say, first impression. But you say, let me hold back a little bit and say, I want to find out more, to either get reinforcement of my initial judgment or give the potential to alter my judgment based on additional information I can acquire of that said person. That's the kind of the more intellectual way of approaching it. But pretending like, oh, I don't judge anybody, right off the bat, you're lying. But anyways, that's my 2 cents on judgment today. What do you think?